Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming and thanks for attending. I'd like to call to order the November 15th meeting of the Design Review Board. Will the board and ex officio members please introduce themselves, starting with Cameron Boland.
Cameron Boland, AIA representative.
Rick Blackburn, Historic Zoning Commission.
Jared Worsham, downtown representative.
Laura Cole, downtown resident representative.
Perry Childress, East Tennessee Community Design Center.
Josh Wright, urban design representative.
Lindsay Crockett, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Suzanne Taravella, neighborhood representative.
Matthew DeBard-Laban, Downtown Knoxville Alliance.
John Thurman, Downtown Development Representative.
Mike Reynolds, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Dallas DeArmond, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Christina McGrawn, City Law Department.
Peter Ahrens, City Plans Review and Inspections.
Thank you. The minutes of the October 18th meeting have been distributed. Are there any corrections or concerns about those? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve those.
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Did we have any staff approvals this month?
Not this month.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get going on the certificates of appropriateness for 501 West Church Avenue, 10B23DT.
Okay. So this is a major exterior rehabilitation project to the Hilton Hotel downtown. The exterior rehab includes revisions to public spaces and ground level elements and an upper level addition. So starting with the site plan here, which can allow us to kind of orient ourselves. On the west elevation along the curved wall, there is site work that will be completed, new landscaping planters to be installed, new murals, and then new windows along the second elevation, the level of the fitness center. On the south elevation, fronting Church Avenue, there will be new curtain wall glazing to be installed on the first and second stories with two new full light entries installed to provide access to a coffee shop in the hotel lobby. The existing covered walkway will also receive some exterior rehab, including paint and a new porte-cochere ceiling feature. And then there will be cladding and additional details along that entry wall. At the northeast corner, so here's the existing photograph, the existing conditions, and then the proposed work. This one-story massing will receive new brick cladding along the existing stucco exterior, new multi-light glazed openings on the existing second-story wall, a new balcony that's recessed within the structure, and new glazed openings on the first-story wall as well. There's also a new storefront system that's going to be installed and kind of enclose this existing ramp area, which you can sort of see here in the existing conditions. This project also includes new projecting canopies with marquee lights, and then patio work in the south corner here, including a new exterior fireplace on the patio. And so we can go back through photographs of these as we discuss as well. And I'll step back out to look at the addition so we can see that here on the roof level. This is a one-story space that's proposed for the existing roof line. It will extend the full length of the building and have metal framed walls with a painted synthetic stucco cladding and aluminum storefront transom windows. Several of these bays will be recessed to provide a patio with a glass railing with metal posts along the exterior. It'll add approximately 25 feet in height. We can go to the elevation drawings of that as well. This is the work occurring on the lower levels. Those were the fitness center windows I'd referenced, the Church Avenue elevation. The one-story massing and the work that will occur there. And then here's the rooftop elevation level. So the scope of work also includes site work, reworking the driveway and sidewalk, revisions to the valet parking, and then new landscaping along Church and Locust. So overall, this project meets the downtown design guidelines as it establishes new street level engagement along multiple elevations that were previously enclosed. It incorporates new first floor uses that'll draw walk-in traffic with new doors and will establish that consistent rhythm of entrances and windows on elevations which were previously enclosed. The windows, entries, and design details meet the design guidelines and remove many of these existing blank blank walls along street-facing elevations, such as here. And the windows are compatible with the replacement windows that were previously approved for the building in a previous exterior rehabilitation scope. Looking at the rooftop addition, this is also compatible with the building and enhances the skyline of the block. In the words of the design guidelines, there's additional transparency and visual interest at that upper level. And the drawings note that the new signage will be submitted separately. So that's not involved in this package. So staff's recommending approval of 10B 23DT as submitted.
Thank you for that, Thank you for that, Lindsay. Is the applicant here when they like to speak? Please state your name and address.
Catherine Greer, 550 West Main Street.
Sean Hackett. Hey, I'm going to
John.
recuse myself. Just our firm did this work, so I'm going to step out like I like to do.
Okay.
I'm going to recuse myself as well, but not step out.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add to Lindsay's description?
No, Lindsay was very thorough. We're open to any questions or concerns you may have.
Okay, thank you. I think it looks great, but I'd like to open it up to the rest of the board, of course.
I agree. I like I like the clad brick materials. I think that the window mullions are interesting. It gives it almost an industrial touch. I like it.
We had one comment at the design center on the this pull-out parking on Church significantly reduces the sidewalk width. I realize that you're taking out landscaping and adding sidewalk, but then removing it on the street side for that pull-out pickup spot. And our question sort of is, could that not occur in the existing drop-off pickup drive of the hotel and maintain the nice wide sidewalk there? One of the renderings shows pretty well how narrow that gets between the proposed outdoor seating and the car pull off right there. That is an existing fairly wide. That's the walnut side there, but that it does reduce the sidewalk significantly. And that was the question: could the existing pull out in the hotel not serve that same purpose?
Yeah, so if you go, Lindsay, if you can go to the rendering showing the tower, the Portcashare entrance. Yeah, that. So we are planning on relocating the Starbucks coffee shop to that first 3 bays of the lobby on the ground floor. So the intention was for those to be a 15-minute pull-off spot so people could park their cars and go and get their coffee and then leave without crossing traffic with the hotel guests checking in.
You can sort of see in this rendering that it really narrows the sidewalk fairly significantly. I understand the crossing traffic issue. There's an entire row of on-street parking on the other side of Church right there. But it was just the main only issue. Otherwise, I agree with Matthew. I think it's a very attractive design, and one of the things we try to look for is the public domain aspects, especially sidewalk and interactions between cars. So you've got a 15-minute stop with cars coming and going, and a 3 or 4 foot wide piece of sidewalk for the circulation of pedestrians.
Yes, we did keep 5 feet clear from the edge of those planters.
From the shrubs
to the edge of the curb, but we could look to adjust that distance and push the planters closer towards the building.
So it's a little wider than it looks in the rendering there.
Yeah.
I think 5 foot's sort of a standard width on a sidewalk. So.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll agree with you, Perry. If you guys are open to it, I would put that as an optional condition. If you guys wanted to make that sidewalk wider, I think that's always a better thing.
I think, look at the dimension, the top where that site plan was, where it says key plan. And it's dimensioned at 11 feet, that area where the flagpoles are on the far left, bottom left corner. That's 11 feet. It looks almost the same width as the sidewalk.
What you don't see on this drawing is the area that's taken up by the outdoor seating.
I'm sorry, Greg, what?
The outdoor seating's not indicated on the site plan.
Okay.
And so you don't see where it's reduced by the planters.
I'm with you.
On the Walnut side, where the new overhang is going to be, the existing trees that are there, are those going to be removed? If you go to the existing, Lindsay, yeah, that.
All but one. Because they do ride pretty closely up against the building, and we're putting new glazing in the wall. It's really hard to install that and protect the trees.
But we do have a landscape architect that's following the street count requirements, and we have been looking at that as a potential item that would appear as a comment. The new entrances, as Sean had mentioned, we will have to remove 2 of the trees, the existing trees along that side. But we do believe that by opening up this entire facade, you're actually really increasing the pedestrian kind of connection to this. That unfortunately the trees are kind of the 2 items that would be problematic to work around in this particular instance. But we are adding additional new plantings along the existing landscape at plant east of the building. So there's a large monumental sign on the other side of the building that we're kind of going back with additional trees.
By the flagpole location.
Thank you.
Are you a dog-friendly hotel?
They are. So that
Yeah, I was just.
that is a dog walk
Yeah.
outside of that.
Okay, I thought so. I was just gonna say, I appreciate that as a resident who walks around, that you're thinking about the dogs and their needs
Yes,
as well.
and we placed benches
So-
in that green space so you could see.
Okay.
Any more questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval or.
I'd like to make a motion to approve and add that if they do want to widen the sidewalk, that they could do that.
I will second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, now we have 810 Clinch Avenue, 10C23DT. Lindsay, you want to go ahead? Thank you.
This is a fun one. This is exterior rehabilitation and a new addition to the Sunsphere. So you can see that. Like I've never been here. This is exterior rehab and a new addition to the Sunsphere. And you can see the overall scope of the work here. And I'm going to jump to this plan, which I think conveys it. So there's a new entry canopy that will extend over the 3rd level entry stairs with a steel structure and a transparent roof system that will extend to the northeast away from the Sunsphere's base. So you can see that entry canopy here in elevation. The metal canopy will wrap around the walkway to a new metal canopy will walk around the walkway to the 3rd level. And then there's a new addition at the 3rd level of the Sunsphere's base that's projecting to the southwest. It will project outward from the base with a flat roof with rooftop solar panels, an exterior of metal wall panels, so you can see it here in elevation on the side, and then a full light storefront system facing southwest. To accommodate the new addition and the new canopy, there's an existing metal roof and guardrail on the 3rd level that will be removed. I'll jump back to some photos of that. So those are the features shown here. And then there's a new mural that'll be painted on the existing CMU cladding on the 2nd and then 3rd levels, and new signage would be submitted separately. So overall, the design guidelines here, they're more easily applied to buildings and public improvements such as streets and sidewalks than a structure like the Sunsphere. This proposal does meet the intent of the design guidelines. The addition is going to be located at the base. of the steel truss structure. It's close to ground level and it won't detract from that existing architectural design or shape of the Sun Sphere. It's modest in size and the materials are compatible. The glass and metal are compatible with the existing structure. The canopies will replace those existing metal canopies. And it also meets the guidelines by creating easier and more clear pedestrian access to the Sun Sphere. So staff's recommending approval of 10C 23DT as submitted.
Thank you for that. Is the applicant here? Would they like to speak?
Hi, Catherine Greer with 550 West Main Street.
Emmanuel Huber-Feely.
And we are open to taking any questions or any discussions.
Does anybody have anything to say or question? So yeah, this is a very unique addition to the city. So not what comes before us normally.
I'll say I'm very happy with the blue paint.
It took a long time to pick that blue.
Of course, remembering when it was built, but and with that, I would, if there's no further discussion, I would move to accept per staff recommendation as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that finishes up our design review. Now we move on to infill housing review. So we have 1600 North Central Street, 10C23IH.
Okay, so we are returning to this case, which was postponed at the October 2023 meeting. I'm going to give a brief overview of the description of work, but I will let the applicant clarify the changes that have been made. So this project includes 4 new townhouse buildings. There's a building fronting North Central Street containing 4 units, 2 buildings fronting East Oldham Avenue, and then an alley building that is recessed to the rear here. The North Central Street building is 3 stories tall. There's a 2-story massing that's closer to Central Street, and then a recessed third story closer to the rear. And then the 2 buildings fronting East Oldham Avenue, they're 2 stories tall. They have irregularly pitched front gable roofs with roof pitches that vary along the roof line. And then the alley building is 3 stories tall with a 2/12 pitch shed roof. Some of the siding materials are a fiber cement lap siding and mixed exposure heights. And I can run through this. So one thing I noticed that the comments that are in the staff report have not been updated. That is a mistake on my part. So I'm going to go through and speak to them, and kind of speak to the revisions that have been made since the previous submission. And then I'll let the applicant make any clarifications about those, and we can sort of guide the discussion of the board that way. But the recommendation that's in the staff report and published online is the correct recommendation. So the applicant has provided some revisions and additional clarification based on the October submission. The major one here is the applicant revised the roof lines on the Oldham Avenue structures so that the maximum height to the roof peak is 32 feet 8.5 inches, and that is lower in roof height than the ones that are fronting Central. So they sort of flipped the pitch there so that it could step down so that the lower in height buildings are moving further into the block with the properties that are single stories, 1.5 stories, and 2 stories. The applicant has also provided some visual clarification on the siding. We had a discussion about this mixed overlap siding product. And then we also have received this rendering, which has a perspective image, because we had a significant amount of discussion about the alley buildings and whether any detail would be necessary and what their level of visibility would be from points on Oldham and points on Central. So we can run through some of these comments, but in general, the staff recommendation would be that the design review board discuss the revisions made to the roof lines of the units fronting East Oldham Avenue, and then also whether there are any design elements necessary to align these alley units with the contact context. We had discussed in the previous review how the design guidelines recommend that multifamily buildings use porches, bays, and breaks in the front facade to sort of break up the buildings, and the alley units don't incorporate those. They are internal to the site. They may be minimally visible from the right of way, but the rendering does show them and as their height. The board members discussed any additional modifications that may be necessary there, but also discussed their sort of secondary nature as an alley building. So pending input and additional conditions from the board on those above items, staff's recommending approval of 10C23IH, subject to the conditions that the final site plan meet engineering standards, and then these elevation drawings meet the design standards of the CG2 zoning and the principal use standards for townhouses.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. Is the applicant here? Would they like to speak?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Page. I'm representing Franklin Architects out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, address 142 North Market Street. As Lindsay already stated, we did try to address the majority of the comments that seemed to create the most concern at our last meeting, which were the overall height of the buildings and the visibility of the alley units from the right of way. If you all have any specific discussion items, I would be happy to address any concerns that you all continue to have.
Thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions from the board?
I do. I have a couple. Hi, Sarah. My first question, I think, is a little bit of an easier one. Can you talk a little bit more about what the intended materials are for the townhouses that face the Oldham side? Certainly. That's actually basically just a standard overlap siding, but instead of using only 6-inch for the whole thing, we're going to do a mix of 4, 6, and 8 in a random pattern, so that way we're giving a nod to the historic clapboard-sided houses in the neighborhood. However, all of the existing houses are a varying mix, so we wanted to give a nod to that material without just having a 6-inch standard overlap. Great, thank you for that. And then the other question is about the roof line, which I think is like interesting and fun, but from just a detailing standpoint, which is not really the purview of this board, but just for my own concern, seems like a very risky detail and potentially one that could be executed poorly. Lots of maintenance involved in that valley. And so I'm just wondering if you could comment a little bit on your intentions for how to pull that off successfully. Certainly. So we've done a similar kind of multi-gable, what you would think of as running the wrong way on a townhome, where it was actually on each individual townhome. So in this instance, you would end up with 3 valleys and 3 crickets kind of for each of those buildings, with a collector head and a downspout with ice and water shield underneath those. So in this instance, one of the things that we were actually trying to address was minimizing the number of valleys and crickets that we would be dealing with in this construction, but still having some nod to the gable form. You're welcome.
It does seem like to have a significant crickets would show in the elevations. That's sort of why our question, I think, comes up, that if there's a significant slope, or if the crickets are sloped to the center of the valley, that they would show in the elevation. That's I think.
I guess I understand that question. Generally, I hadn't gotten that far. We're still in SD, so yes, there will be crickets. I have found that because in this same instance, I live next door to the townhomes that we were designing and building, and I couldn't see the crickets from even across the street or getting up on my own roof and looking. So you will not notice them.
Yeah, they would not be visible from the streets, just from an architectural drawing standpoint. Realizing you never see a building in elevation,
right?
Which a lot of people may not realize that you're never the same distance from all points. But I did want to thank you for the 3D that helped explain the height of the alley building and how they interacted.
And then just to, I guess, add a little bit more context for the Oldham units, I think the overall height of the building closest to the
I guess, alley, and then the next existing home that's there, the overall height I think is just over 30 feet, whereas originally that particular peak was at 34.5 feet. So we did try and drop the overall heights as we went down the street. The visual trick, again, in elevation is that the elevation of the street itself is rising as you go down Oldham. And so in straight elevation, they don't really look like they're getting any shorter, but the overall height of the buildings are actually decreasing as you go up the street.
One thing that would help with that in the future, to just put a scale figure in the drawing, just to have a scale reference would be good for that discussion. Lindsay, was there any, do you need to read any of the neighborhood comments? If there are any.
I forwarded 2 bits of additional public input to the board this afternoon, and so we will enter those into the record. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I can just provide the summary from the president of the Oakwood Lincoln Park Neighborhood Association. Just noted that the neighborhood is in favor of this development. We would ask more detailed design be added to the building fronts on Central Street to help conform more to the surrounding area so it looks like it belongs in the neighborhood as housing. They reference the design on Oldham as referencing a one more oddly shaped house on that street instead of the predominant Craftsman or Victorian type designs that surround the area. We would ask that columns be added to the stoops for the townhouses on Oldham. And then they reference the sliding glass door as well.
Lindsay, for clarity, can you bring us up to speed on if there are any historic overlays or anything for this particular parcel as far as requirements for design go?
Well, so this property has the infill housing overlay. There's no additional historic related design review to the property. I will flag that the historic Queen Anne house that's here is going to remain. So there is sort of an element of preservation to this project, but the applicable design guidelines here are the infill housing guidelines. Does that answer your question?
Yes, perfect. Okay. Thank you.
I have questions and comments as well, if anyone else doesn't have any. Like I said in the last meeting, I want to see the project succeed, just like someone else said today, but I have concerns and comments as well still from the last time, and honestly would like to go ahead and move into a motion, but break it into given that there's 3 distinct three distinct structures on this site, I'd like to break the motion into 2, along with conditions. And I think along the way, if the rest of the board has a comment as I'm stating them to argue it or feedback to it, please stop me.
Real quick, just on behalf of my client, if I could get a general direction of the things that you would
Absolutely.
like to apply to the project before we just start adding a list of things that they will be required to integrate into their project.
So you'd like me to speak to what the issues are first before saying the conditions?
Yes.
Okay. First, with overall, all 3 structures, the materials. You show the siding, but we also show fiber cement paneling. In my opinion, they're not contextual and will not age well. They are not durable for in the way that they're detailed or executed. They generally require caulk or battens to cover the seams.
This would actually be a reveal panel.
Unless you tell me otherwise. That's the part I was trying to get to. Unless you can tell me otherwise.
As far as I understand, for the infill guidelines, there is actually a pretty generic list of requirements that we are required to meet in the infill housing guidelines, and the exact detailing of each of the individual materials is not necessarily pertinent to this board.
So I can't comment on it, is what you're saying?
I guess I am asking, is that something that this board can dictate the means and methods and architectural detailing of this project?
I would defer to the law department on this one.
As far as this project goes and the staff recommendations, I think those types of things are relevant in terms of contextualizing projects within the neighborhood and the context in which they're located. I think it probably is relevant for discussion. I guess ultimately it kind of depends on which way the board, what kind of emotion the board is going to hear on it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And Sarah, you said the intention is for it to be a reveal panel.
Yes.
Which is ideal. That's different. What I typically think of is student housing that we see across the river. That
Totally
is
understand.
correct. So that's that concern. There's a specification in the drawings for parge coating. The base, the plinth, I think of the both the townhome, not the townhomes, the multifamily and the alley side. That, again, not a motion yet, but a request for, again, longevity of materials that we often see in the infill overlay, is to ask that to be, I ask that to be generally to be cementitious stucco with an actual drainage layer just for the longevity and lasting and durability of the material. And given the height, as we can see, it's going to be a fairly prominent facade. So that's somewhat minute, but another material detail. The alley building. I feel like isn't, per the last discussion, is not articulating a base metal top. And as the hinted to previously, the scale needs to be broken down further just in the detailing of the fenestration. I think essentially from level 2 up and in between units, if there was some way of actually articulating them as individual pieces with depth or some sort of reveal, would actually help articulate those to break up the scale and the height and make them actually look like a street presence to the alley.
So the alley is only 12 feet wide, and our building is both behind the Victorian house in Plain and then also behind the church across the street.
Right.
So I guess requiring street presence for an alley facing building seems a little
well, I'll say that that building is generally unprecedented in North Knoxville, unless someone can tell me differently. So again, you're setting a precedent for how we address more grand and ambitious structures on the alley. I think there was a comment at the last review meeting that what if the structure across the road did become something else? I know we can't speculate, but it's got gravity in the fact that it's new to what we typically see, and the fact that it has such a street edge presence, alley presence. Okay, well, at the very least, the facade is just not articulated and thoughtful. It honestly seems like an afterthought, in my opinion, on the backside. Townhomes are generally successful, in my opinion. I think those work. I think that for minute comments, I think the north elevation of the townhomes is as important as the front facade, and given the way that you approach it. And I think that there needs to be potentially that blank face of the brick on the north side would need additional fenestration to not have such a blank face. And on the south side, that being the side, it also is the street face of that project, and it's fairly well articulated and nice. I think failure in it is the stair step of the brick as it leads to the plinth or the patio. I think that would be better as not brick veneer with under the piece under the guardrail, and actually maybe mimic your core 10 or your parge coat to basically break that massing so that it doesn't seem so odd as it transitions up that spot. And finally, the Oldham units. There's a question, what's the depth of the front porches? I know they're angled, of course, but what's the seatable depth? I guess the part behind the planters.
So at the narrowest spot, it is 2 feet, and at the deepest spot, it is 5 feet.
Okay.
So it's more of a hangout porch, or hoping that you can create an indoor-outdoor feel from your living room.
Okay. And if you straighten that wall, to give more depth to that front porch, would you gain a lot of usable space on the interior, or lose a lot of usable space?
You would basically lose your ability to have a living area, or you would sacrifice your dining room and then have an eat-in area. I guess, again, if we're getting into the floor plan, that seems a little outside the purview.
It's not. I'm actually speaking specifically to the front porch. We often talk about infill housing, about useful front porches, and contextuality to the other projects or houses on that street and in the neighborhood. I think it would benefit from the angle being removed to be able to have an actual usable front porch.
The alternate would be to only have a stoop, and we thought that it was best to have a front porch that you could hang out on, have planters or a bench or a couple of small chairs so that you can engage with your neighbors as opposed to just a stoop entry.
And that's what I'm hoping to see, is engagement with the street front and the neighbors. So that's
So the option is either what we have shown or a stoop. Those are the only things that will fit within the
I would
floor
interject, Cameron, I think their intent here, and this brings us back to the sliding glass doors, is that this stoop is part of the living room.
Yes.
And
Indoor,
it's intended
outdoor.
to be,
Yeah,
the
like
two
she's saying.
spaces are intended to be used together, such that you are on your porch in your living room and would be closed off, in inclement weather from the times that you wouldn't, but then when you would be sitting on your porch, you'd have that sliding glass door open, and it would be a usable, much deeper space that would include interior as well. It's sort of the old indoor-outdoor, as you had referenced, that was very popular in the mid-century houses that you would see more of anyway. But that, I see one of the things Cameron's referring to is we're often very adamant about usable front porches and that they have a depth, but they also are porches that are outside of solid walls with windows and not a transparent wall that opens up like you're proposing here. So I think that may be just a difference in how you look at how a porch is used.
Understood. I appreciate that, Perry. I think there's just some slight last two comments, and then we can talk from that. I think on that Oldham elevation, there's just some near misses on the pier elevation. The upper and lower fenestrations just barely don't align. I know that you've made a concerted effort to have like a staccato random pattern in other places, but just as you continue, make sure that the detailing, it's hard to see from this distance, but if you zoom in, just make sure that those, I'm understanding that Oldham facade is the more restrained portion of this design, and just to make sure that those actually do have alignments would be important to maintain that. Finally, my opinion, again, the rest of the board can speak, is given the other nuances with the angled front entry, the varying heights of the siding, no articulation of the window units, that the north and south elevations should have revised roof lines to have consistent slopes per gable, but can and should have varying gable pitches across the 4 units. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess then my concern becomes our intent was to kind of have everything below the bearing height be the same and then play with the plane above that. Whereas if you just have, say, a 12 by 12 and then an 10 by 12 and then an 8 by 12 and a 6 by 12, it feels, I guess, almost less intentional because everything below the bearing line is so rigid. To have symmetrical triangles above that are just stepping as you go would be more odd. And again, that's a subjective thing. That's just a design idea. So.
Well, now I'm at motions unless anybody else wants to say something.
Yeah, I'll speak. So when it comes to the materials, I feel like they conform, and that I don't want to extend this board's reach into that area so that we start to design other people's buildings for themselves, especially for infill housing. I feel like they've come back with a design that's, I like the way it's broken up into different components. So when you look at the building, it feels as if it was built at different times so that you get that multi-layered, three-dimensional layering on the streetscape and from a perspective view. As far as the alley buildings, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I also know that we have to have the ability to allow alley buildings to be looser so that the things that don't conform have to have a place to release when you're working on a plan for a complex building like this. So alleys have traditionally been oddball places that allow for that. That's where the trash is. That's where everything else is. It's not a walkable streetscape. So that's why that has evolved in that way. As far as the roof pitches, they're not my favorite thing, but again, I'm not willing to control that design because I know that when mid-mod buildings came out, people protested those as well, and now we preserve them. So personally, I think this is okay to move forward as presented.
I just wonder if you could clarify this one thing real quick. On the alley structures, that ground floor off the alley, well, where that fiber cement is recessed pretty far back, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so that's really not something that you're going to see.
No.
So pretty much the whole ground floor is an open parking space.
Correct. Except for the landing entry.
Okay.
Remind me what the materials are on the central building. That's brick, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a lot of historic red brick in
there it
that
is.
general part of town. And that's where we're heading, is to
Yeah.
go to a red brick that kind of speaks to some of those historic manufacturing buildings that are along there where Wild Love and Mid-Mod, in fact, are, as well as the church next door.
Yeah, I thought I remembered that from last meeting. I couldn't find it.
Well, I'd like to make a motion. Again, in two parts. I'd like to motion to approve the townhomes. They're all townhouses. The townhomes on Central Street as designed and per staff recommendations. I would motion to approve the alley building with the condition that the design team at least takes a pass at adding articulation to that alley facing facade to break up the scale, both vertically and horizontally, and return to planning staff for review and approval. And thirdly, would make a motion to postpone the Oldham facing properties for the chance of the design applicant to show the board the more rigorous version of the roof as described with the similar pitched gables. to argue for the varying pitches as shown currently.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean in that last sentence. When you say as described, do you mean as you described it?
As I had described it previously, that they would have consistent pitches per gable form, but could have varying pitches throughout the 4 forms.
Yeah, I'm just not comfortable with that personally, because I'm not saying that your design concept is incorrect. I just don't think it's our place to have them come back with design modifications in that way. If this conforms to what is required, that has been approved as the guidelines, then we need to conform to that, not our own idea there.
So I can provide a clarification on the relevant design guidelines here and say that the board is charged with the interpretation of these design guidelines. So the relevant guidelines are new roofs should be designed to have a similar pitch to original housing on the block. And then more complex roofs, such as hipped roofs and dormers, should be part of new housing designs when such forms were historically used on the block.
I guess per our comments last time, our thought is that this is clearly not a single family home nestled in amongst single family homes. It is a series of much denser housing on the corner of a commercial corridor that is transitioning back into a more residential space. And that we felt that it's not going to be a craftsman bungalow, because that's not what it is. And so we wanted to try to echo some of the historic pieces that we found in the built fabric of the neighborhood, but in a way that was clear that this is a new building.
Yeah, and let me clarify. I agree with that, and that's how I would approach it too. And again, the board can argue and disagree too with along or against me, but that Oldham facade has every modern trick used on it, and I'm only advocating for some slight restraint in the modernity of it to have a sensitive interpretation of the contextual surroundings. It's almost there, in my opinion, again, my opinion, and that's why I've stated what I have, but there still needs to be some restraint, in my opinion. But others may disagree on the board.
Yeah, I disagree a little bit. There's an empty parking lot just to the south of there. There's an industrial brick building that's used as a barber shop to the southwest of there. To the north, there's a metal building that's like a roofing company, and then there's the Victorian house, I guess, and a brick church.
That was the context.
Yeah, I think we're not just having to respect the neighborhood behind, but the entire corridor of Central. So, and I love the pitches. I think they lean to the mountains. They look, I live up on that hill and I look at those mountains in the morning, and that's the first thing I saw when I saw them. I thought that creates an interesting perspective for transition.
I agree with that. I think it is very subjective, and the guidelines leave a lot of latitude for us to kind of interpret what's appropriate. But this is a transitional space with a lot of different arguing contextual pieces. And I think it's actually a sensitive attempt to be a piece among all of those other pieces. And to Josh's point, I just don't think that we have the authority to require more than they've already provided.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
The third part was never. That was the part that was argued, so I guess that still counts as a full motion. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, not hearing a second. How does that work? Does it just die or what?
yeah, if the motion can fail for a lack of a second.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion to approve per staff recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion to approve per staff recommendation. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion?
I'd like to make comment. I'm going to support that. I agree with your comments. Is the roof line my favorite thing about this? No, but is it overextending a little bit? I think potentially. So I want to support it, but also I think the alley building, like we've talked about, is an alley, and so if that building was fronting, Central or Oldham, I wouldn't support it. Just I think it needs a little more definition, but it is in an alley. So given what it is, I think per the comments, I'm comfortable with the revisions. My thing was mainly about height at the last meeting, and I think they came back and addressed some of that. So.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you all for your patience and interested debate.
Thank you. Okay, we have 1706 Ohio Avenue, 1708 Ohio Avenue, and 1710 Ohio Avenue, all together with the same applicant. That's 11A23IH, 11B23IH, and 11C23IH.
Yes, and so as Josh clarified here, these are 3 applications, but the elevations provided for the initial application, and I know the applicant has some revisions here, but I'm going to review the scope of work for these ones and the findings for these ones as we've done before, but they will require 3 votes. So I can put those staff recommendations on the board for you guys as we discuss, but I'm just going to go through the scope of work one time. This is a new primary residence that's fronting Ohio Avenue. It's a 1-story front gable roof residence. It's approximately 50 feet wide. 24 feet wide by 50 feet long. And it's proposed to be initially was proposed to be set approximately 23 feet from the front property line. The house is proposed to rest on a 12-inch tall cement washed stucco foundation with a 7/12 front gable roof. Those are notes that are drawn on the elevation drawings. And then the house will be clad in vinyl siding with a vinyl shake siding on the front gable roof. The parking is proposed to be a 300 square feet concrete parking area at the rear of the house and accessed via the alley. So some of the findings that are relevant here, the initial comment was that the house was proposed to be set 23 feet from the front property line. The average front setback of the block is 18 feet. The adjacent houses are 19 and 21 from the front property line. And so the recommendation was the house should be moved slightly closer to the front property line to maintain a consistent streetscape pattern. The applicant has provided a revised site plan indicating this, showing that 18 feet with a walkway to the street. So that was not in the application packet, but that's been provided in response to the staff report, and that applies at 1706, 8, and 10 as well. This block to receive the new construction is relatively vacant. I can pull that up on KGIS. There is a couple of modified craftsman bungalows, 1 shotgun house, and then a church building. So in general, this 1-story 3-bay building is proportional to the dimensions of the lot, and the side yards setbacks are consistent with the block. It will create sort of a consistent pattern, having 3 adjacent houses. The parking meets the infill guidelines. The parking pad is accessed from the alley located to the rear of the house. Final revisions to the site plan may be necessary to meet city engineering standards. The 3-bay facade is similar to the context. Drawings do indicate a 12-inch foundation, which is generally compatible with the context. The house has an 8 feet deep front porch that's recessed under that primary roof line. The drawings indicate a 6x6 square columns. The revised roof porch as a 7/12 pitch is appropriate within the infill housing guidelines. The main finding here is that and then there's 1 elevation shown on that left side elevation. So the staff recommendation would be to incorporate 1 additional window to maintain those proportions of solid to void. The house is proposed to be identical to the houses at 1708 and 1710 10 Ohio Avenue. So the staff recommendation would be revisions should be made to the plans to introduce some differentiation in design among those three houses. Some of these options could include revised roof lines, porch design and placement, and then the overall house massings. And so I know that applicant, you brought some of those things here. I don't think we necessarily need to get into those because the staff recommendation would be that the revisions be made to differentiate. So approval of 11A, and this is going to be a similar motion for all three, and we can go back to them. But for 11A, which is 1706 Ohio Avenue, approval subject to the conditions that the final site plan meets city engineering standards, the house be moved closer to the front property line to align with the pattern of the block, one window be added to the left elevation, and then revisions be made to differentiate from the adjacent new houses at 1708 and 10 Ohio Avenue with approval by staff.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant here? Would they like to speak? Can you press the button?
I'm sorry. Yes, my name is Asia. At 1706 Ohio, we're going to leave it the same plan as she said, 1708. We're going to put the hemp roof on. We're going to add a new window on the side. And at 1710, we're going to do an eyebrow roofing. I'm sorry. We're going to put the eyebrow roofing across. And we're going to split up the front window so it'll be two windows in the front instead of, so they're all going to be different. Yes.
I know we've discussed this, and I talked about this with Michael as well, that in terms of the staff recommendation here, we'll just ask that those changes be reflected on the drawings and submitted to staff, and you would have to do that for permitting anyways.
Thank you. It sounds like you're trying to address everything the staff is concerned about already. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I had
Any questions from the staff?
One other comment, would it be possible to mirror one of the houses, to just build it the other way around with the door on the right instead of the left so that one of them is reverse of the other two? Just another way to mix them up a little more. It's be the same plan, the only difference would be just reversing the orientation.
I think
with that and the changes you've mentioned should differentiate them sufficiently.
I think one thing I will say to that is I did discuss that with Michael Haynes, the other contractor on this project, and he had some concerns about mirroring them because there are some older growth pecan trees on the rear of the parcels that he's interested in preserving, and he was concerned that if he had to flip them, he would have to flip the parking to provide that access. And so he's interested in preserving some trees on the rear of the property as well.
Yeah, there's additional site aspects that make that difficult. I consider there might also be for driveways. Sometimes if you put them together, the site won't work it. So So maybe, and I think that's something that could fall under item 4 as an option for discussion if it would work on one of those houses. But I did just want to bring up that he'd mentioned some trees on the property as a concern.
Sorry, we had the big trees in the back that we was trying to keep because it make it look better to me, I guess. And we trying to cut down the ones in the front that's old and dead so it don't fall on nothing, on no cars and stuff. So we was really trying to just keep the bigger trees in the back.
I had a question. Did you, you talked about aligning the setback, which I know is a big thing with our board. Did you provide direction to them about what may be an appropriate setback?
I have not provided, had provided the average front setback of the block, which is 18 feet. Again, that's sort of challenging on this block because there is not a lot of context. The adjacent house is 19 feet and it has an encroaching front porch, and then there's a 21 feet one, but it is set somewhat farther away from there. So they had responded with this 18 feet front setback. This on the screen is the revised one, but yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
So they addressed that one.
Yeah,
well, and since these are very similar, I would think having a little bit of variation, say 3 or 4 feet variation between the setbacks, might actually add some contact or some textural nature to the, while we're doing the windows and stuff.
What number are we on? 1706? Yes. Motion to approve based on staff comments for 1706 Ohio Avenue.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. You want to just run through them?
Yeah,
Suzanne?
here we go. 1708 Ohio Avenue, I recommend to accept based on staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion passes.
1710, is that the right number? Ohio Avenue, motion to approve based on staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I'll follow up with you and Michael via email and phone too. Okay.
Okay, now we have two more of the same owner, 3413 Gap Road and 3415 Gap Road, 11D23IH and 11E23IH.
Okay. So this is a pretty unique situation, and I'll give some context here. And I think we can discuss these in general together and have separate motions. The houses are somewhat different from each other, so there may be something that you want to address in one or the other, or the motion may be the same. So this is an instance where we're doing after the fact review of revisions to a previously approved COA. The approved site plan and elevation drawings are included in the application packet. I've got the site plan for 3413 here. That's one highlighted in red. And then the elevation drawings for this property. And they can be compared with some photos of the existing condition. So this is 3413 Gap Road. And then I'll jump ahead to looking at 3415 Gap Road, the site plan. This is the second house over. And then the elevation drawings as they were shown and approved by the Design Review Board in March 2022. And then this is a photograph provided by the applicant of the house as it was built. So there are a significant amount of variations from the previous approvals in 2022, and then I'll talk about the context of the block here. So some of the variations from the drawing, in this one, the driveway is located on the right side of the house instead of the left. The foundation height is very different from what was approved on the elevation drawing. So here's an existing photograph of the property, and here is what the Design Review Board reviewed and approved in March 2022. The front porch foundation and design is different from what was approved. It was shown as an enclosed foundation resting on the grade instead of an elevated, open sort of deck style foundation that was built, and you can see that. And then the more finished products here along the block. The front porch column design is different. You can see in the as-built, these are just square posts as opposed to the craftsman style designs that were approved by the board. The front door placement was flipped from the approved drawings. There are side elevation windows that were not installed as shown. And then the rear door and windows were flipped from the approved drawings. And then there's a facade elevation, a facade gable window detail that's currently omitted on the house and then on the comparable designs of the block. So this is an opportunity really for some discussion about enforcement, but then, follow-up elements here too. So these two buildings, 3413 and 15 Gap Road, and I can go ahead and show you guys 3415 as well, recognizing that we will need another separate vote on this. So, sorry. 3415, here's the elevation drawings. Some of the variations here include that foundation height, the front porch foundation, the front porch design. So here it was shown as a partial width shed roof porch supported by 2 columns, but as built, the porch extends the full length of the facade. The side elevation windows and then the siding design differ from there. So these are 2 houses, but there were 5 other houses that were submitted and reviewed in this process. The 3413 and 3415 Gap Road were reviewed and approved by the board in 2022. Planning staff reviewed and stamped the final elevation drawings when the plans review and inspections didn't have a digital permitting system, we would actually provide a hard copy stamp on these final elevation drawings, so those could be used in the field. We stamped those in April 2022. So by spring 2023, at least 5 of these houses were completed, received certificates of occupancy, and several have been sold. At this time, plans review and inspection staff didn't identify any discrepancies with the COAs or notify planning staff of the issues. In August 2023, field inspectors did identify discrepancies with the COAs for these 2 houses. The 3413 Gap Road, as we can see here, it hasn't received siding or porch finishes. And then 3415 is relatively complete and received a failed inspection. So here we're in this instance where we're reviewing design elements such as significant changes in foundation heights when these foundations have already been poured, window locations when the fenestrations have already been framed out, and porch details is challenging. It creates unnecessary delays and expense for the applicants. And then additionally, in the opinion of staff, when 5 adjacent houses have similar discrepancies, they've already been completed and sold, modifying minor design elements on 2 of them has somewhat of a negligible effect on the streetscape as built. So just to reiterate the responsibilities here, applicants, including developers, architects, and contractors, are responsible for meeting the requirements of design-related zoning overlays and should recognize when site conditions necessitate major design changes. So in the instance here, that would relate particularly to the foundation height. The architect did show the pretty extensive slope of this property in there, but then the elevation drawings are relatively flat. When site conditions necessitate major design changes, staff should be informed to avoid after-the-fact reviews. And then on the enforcement side, city plans review and inspection staff are responsible for enforcing the zoning code. That includes design-related overlays. Planning staff review these drawings that are submitted for permitting, and so the field text should include review of the COAs, the site plan and elevation drawings to ensure what is built complies with the zoning code and design guidelines. So really the staff recommendation here, this is a discussion sort of thing, discussing a path forward for enforcement, and then the board should identify if there are any changes that should be made to bring these 2 houses into compliance with the COAs issued in March.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. That's a lot to unpack. Would the applicant like to speak? And please state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Amber Culpepper. I am the owner and also the GC. So I take full responsibility. It is not my foreman. It is not my architect. It is not the city inspectors in my eyes. It's me. And on this project, yes, the site plan was wrong. And my biggest concern, I failed you guys. I mean, I did. My biggest concern moving forward was do it to code, do everything right, build it correctly. And so regarding the porch, when it was smaller, I'm like, nobody's going to use this porch. Based on the elevation, it's not usable. So let's extend this over and make sure we build it the way we need to be built. So to you, I am sorry. My inspectors have made it very clear to me that they're in a hot water, and it is my fault. It is not theirs. It is mine. So I'm falling on the sword. I want to make this right. I've done other infill homes before, and I don't know how I dropped the ball so badly, but we have sat down as a team. And as far as the staff recommendations, that will absolutely be part of our blown up blueprints, and not just in the packet. So I built the homes, what I thought would be when we came to different situations, when, for example, the driveways were not very usable and they were so tight, we had to put a curb on them, and that took up some of the width. And if you'll go back a couple of different slides, you can see one of our vehicles, one of my guys, he is parked right there. If you actually finish the grade work and you put the driveway in, there's no room for a bay window on those sides. It's just too close, especially after you have anything going up and down through there. So again, I did not even think to bring it to you guys. I was on the job and I was just like, it doesn't make sense. Like, we're way too close. People are going to hit it from the other one. Let's admit it. And I completely failed on this project to come back to you guys and say, I'm changing this. Are you okay with it? And here's why. And quite honestly, it was a timing thing. I had to make a decision, and I had to keep my guys working, and I didn't think about the process. So I do apologize.
Well, thank you for your directness and honesty about that. I'd like to open it up to any comments from the board.
I've got a couple that relate to some precedent we had in the neighborhood on Delaware. It has been many years ago. I can't remember if Lindsay was involved at that time, but we had a person build a house on Delaware that he built much higher than had been approved, and it went through considerable re-reviews and debates, and in the end, we made him lower the house. He brought in a house mover, picked up the house, took 2 courses a block off, and set it back down. I don't know that that's an option here. We did look at other options on this previous one that might help here, and that is to do what they historically did in neighborhoods that are steep like this, and that is a retaining wall and concrete steps that come up through the retaining wall from the street or from your driveway in a way that makes the yard closer to the house, and you address the street with a retaining wall with formal steps that lead to the house. And that might be, I know retaining walls are not cheap, but it'd be cheaper than trying to lower the whole house or tear it down and start over.
True, and we are on that design on the right side. We're at 7 feet from the property line. On the left side with the driveways, if we tried to put in a retaining wall there, you wouldn't have a driveway. Not wide enough to meet a car to be able to access and go up it. It's a very narrow lot.
Well, I'd bring the retaining wall out in line with the sidewall of the house. So it just extends your foundation wall forward.
Okay, understand.
To do something about that, I'm a little surprised that structural would allow that much unsupported column in height as well. So I have other concerns about that in addition to the appearance part, which is more our charge. I don't really have an issue with enlarging the porch and the notion that with it way up there in the sky, it wasn't very usable as a small one. It's more like a deck in the mountains now. The construction of the others is, Lindsay, the variations and things that have not quite met the guidelines does give us an issue with just how do we enforce what we ruled here. And on infill housing, even more so than the Design Review Board, I believe it has, we have the ability to vary things and enforce by code. So it is a codified, is that right, Christine?
Yes, the board acting in the infill capacity does have the ability to grant variances. That's true.
So, and enforce our things. I always have to back up and applaud people building in these difficult places and these neighborhoods that aren't. So I would, with that, would leave it to try to find a way to mitigate these two through retaining walls and other ways to lower the apparent height of the buildings. It looks possible on this one that it could be lowered a block row or two, and we have enforced that in the past. So I'm not sure how to move forward other than possibly resubmittals from you guys to staff, and if they aren't comfortable with approval, bringing it back to the committee in the next meeting.
Were these required to be visitable?
Yes, and it is from the back side.
Still processing lots of information. I like what Perry said about the retaining wall idea, because I think that at this stage of development, it seems unreasonable to me to ask you to reconstruct the structure, meaning lowering the height. But I do think making the foundation height more street friendly, pedestrian friendly, visually makes sense, is the priority rather than trying to reconfigure the whole thing at this point. That seems unreasonable to me.
Are there still no sidewalks? Are there still no sidewalks on the street?
No sidewalks. It's a very dangerous hill. It's a very
So there's kind of like a pseudo sidewalk. Those are those sidewalks up to each individual house, but they don't intentionally connect in front of the porches. Okay.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah. My first thought was, you see sometimes some houses that are on hills that have this elevated front porch, and I am glad you made the porches bigger. And then the big problem is that it's not enclosed underneath, and so you get this weird space underneath the porch. And so my thought was, if there was a way to enclose that and possibly do what you would normally see as decorative venting under there to give some texture to it, that might be a good way to pull that back into something that feels more appropriate and more in conformance with what you had before. I mean, I'm a little tempted to try to see this as if, like the columns are different, right? That's what we approved. Would we approve these now? We probably would. They might need to be a little thicker.
the two houses right next to us. They're also in infill, and they have the 6x6 columns as well. And so that, again, that's just what I went with. I mean, that's what I was on the plans, and as far as a comment on there. And I just wanted it to be able to maintain the structural integrity longer. So that's why I did wrap them. It just trying to do the right thing, and I did the wrong thing.
Yeah, as Lindsay has pulled up, the approved columns had masonry bases and slope and tapered craftsman uppers.
I have a question about the windows. I think it's kind of obvious what sort of happened with the foundation situation. The site plan and the elevations clearly are not coordinated. So that's a separate issue. But why are some of the windows not in the right place? That seems like an easier fix.
Whenever we had to move some of the windows, it started on the top. There wasn't enough wall space for furniture or to be able to access and be able to divide. Because when you walk in the front door, it's just a shot back, and you have your dining room and then your kitchen. So to actually be able to lay out the living room and have it to be family friendly with furniture, we had to move them around a little bit.
I know you said it's not the architect's. I know you're taking full responsibility, but what involvement did the actual designer have in this post giving you a set of drawings? Was there any sort of construction administration they were involved in?
I take all responsibility, but yes, I work with them on all of my projects, and it was an oversight on me. It was me, but yes, I do work with Kara on all projects.
I know that you already said this, Lindsay, but just to help us understand, what are we trying to achieve?
Because these are distinctly different from the COAs, the options here are an after-the-fact approval or approval with conditions that changes are made to bring these into the guidelines, or there is the capacity for denial, as Perry has referenced there. I was not familiar with that one on Delaware, but there have been more extreme circumstances where things are denied after the fact. So for their inspections to be closed out, ultimately they need to have a COA that aligns with the drawings, or that aligns with what is built.
Okay, and so is it at this point, like from a Peters department perspective, are there code issues that are still left to be resolved?
I don't believe so.
We're really just looking at the COA at this point. Okay.
Yeah.
But what Lindsay started with too is about. I mean, this maybe not is the platform for the discussion, but it is a important discussion about inspection and accountability of a COA throughout the life of the project. Because I see every day driving down the streets of Oakwood Lincoln Park, houses that we approved that don't look like what we approved, but given what they are, I'm like, that's not a battle to fight. It always goes in my head is who's holding the piece of paper that has the drawing on it and saying that doesn't look like it. Why are you doing that, Mr. Contractor, Mrs. Contractor? So that's just a statement, less of a question or anything.
Do you have any ideas on how you could bring this into something that you feel would conform with the original design intent?
Hi, my name is Jonathan Novak, the foreman on the project. On the pictures of 3413, 3415, there's still some minor grade dressing, bring some of the dirt levels up. We're looking at retainer wall options just to be able to walk away and it actually lasts, several years without washout or anything like that. It's just been a real challenge on that hill. We started at the top house with hilltop protection area that kind of kiboshed our plans to, remove dirt and make a better slope going down the hill as we went. And here we are at the last two homes. We do have some challenges. We could put in some retainer walls, push a little bit more dirt around, bring up the dirt level just to make it not look like it's up in the sky. Those were options we discussed.
Is there anything about that triggers needing an engineered set of drawings though at that point? I mean, that's a crazy slope, and retaining walls and structural implications and civil implications and washout, all of that stuff. Is that, I'm asking, is that something that would, if I was doing this on a commercial project, I would be very aware of my civil drawings that tells me how that hill's not going to just wash away over time.
We do work with a civil engineer when we do have questions. We bring them in to make sure we're doing what is right. We work with Quorum, but we do work with them.
And I get that. I'm just saying, documented, stamped, cover your butt, it's in the file, drawings, that sort of thing. I'm asking if that would be required to make these decisions.
I am trying to put together a motion in my mind. I'm going to take a stab at it, but I am certainly open to suggestions. I'd like to make a motion, unless there's any more comment or discussion. Okay. That we postpone approval and ask that you come back with a proposed solution that addresses the foundation and the front elevation specifically, that's the priority, and we'll take it from there. But I think, I'm not going to elaborate because I don't want the motion to get too long.
When you say front elevation, you mean just generally you mean the materiality, and I mean not the material, but the how the materials are put on.
How the building is addressing the site on the front side.
Right. Slope. I mean, mainly at the lowest level. Not. Are you talking about the upper levels, door entry above the porch?
I'm talking about the porch down to the ground.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Okay.
Yeah.
If I do, just a question, because I'm thinking about keeping my guys employed and moving forward and being able to maintain, the constant flow of business. Would it be something where I do work with the engineer, get them stamped, get it approved, and maybe staff approve it? So it's just a delay that I'm worried about for my people, and having work every day, and rather than saying go home for 3 weeks.
But your site work contractor still isn't on site, is he?
I'm sorry.
Your site work contractor that would do this work, he's still not on site. You'll have to bring him back.
I run equipment, and my
You self-perform?
I'm sorry.
You self-perform the work?
Not all of it, no. When it's above my level, then no, I bring in a guy from Morristown.
Yeah, these retaining walls will definitely have to be engineered and stamped
Yes.
to be approved by plans review, and one of the, I sort of hear what you're saying, you'd like to continue work on this one. I'm just wondering whether we should hold a stop work on this. I am still not convinced it can't be lowered 2 blocks. We've done that before. House movers can pick up a house, no problem. You knock 2 rows of blocks off and you set it back down. And that's and that's just part of not building what was approved.
I have a bit of information to the idea of knocking blocks off on the right side where the driveway goes up against the house. If we knock 2 blocks off, the driveway would actually be above the block line.
And not being out there with a transit and seeing the grades, I can't tell if that's an option at this point. Just from these 2 photos, it appears that this one could come down with a little lowering of the driveway here as well, which would get you some dirt to fill behind that retaining wall.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that was it.
I was going to say the majority of the work, it looks like you've got the exterior skin of the building and you have probably all your drywall plumbing. I don't know how far along you
Drywall's in
are.
that. Yes, this house right there is finished except for the railings and the driveway. It's completely finished inside. And final dress. On the other house, the drywall was delivered today for install tomorrow.
So what we're discussing is not the interior and the exterior skin of the building too much. It is how that porch meets the ground, correct?
Yes.
That's
In
the
my
concern.
opinion, yes.
So
And
taking
just
blocks out seems drastic, but even if you had to do that, that's something that can be done. So
yes, and I'm concerned about the livelihood of my business, honestly. Like, I'm not a big company. I don't know that I would be able to stay in business. I mean, if I had to change something, because I'm waiting on the upper house to be sold and be able to try to list it so I can finance the other ones. I'm not a big company, so I'm trying to figure out how I'll be able to do that as well.
I hear what Perry's saying, and I agree that that's physically possible. And I agree that there are consequences to not following good coordinated plans. I don't know that what we gain by gaining 16 inches closer to the ground. I'd rather see a thoughtful, creative design solution that helps that porch make some sense as far as it relates to the ground plane. And I am not going to design this for you, but there are precedents in New Orleans and other places where porches are elevated off the ground, and I would encourage you to look at those and see if there's something creative and beautiful and fun that you can do with this that enhances the project and isn't just a Band-Aid.
This gives you financial flexibility by doing the planning and recommendation on your own. And there's going to be some type of financial repercussion one way or another.
Absolutely.
So
I just
we're
wanted
trying to give you the cheapest option to move forward.
And I appreciate that greatly.
So then further, and I don't want to put Lindsay in a tough spot, but is this something that staff could approve if they came back with something that you believed was an acceptable solution? Okay, then part of my motion is to allow Lindsay and staff to do the approval rather than coming back before the board.
I have a quick question though. How is this design going to happen and her continue to keep working? Does it mean she's going to finish, just dry it in, everything's going to be addressed except for the porch?
So I'd like to ask, Peter, can you clarify where these buildings actually are in the permitting process? Did they receive a stop work order? One of them got a failed inspection. What's going on with this one? Do they have the capacity to continue working on the interior and applying the materials if they are coming back to us? Would it just ultimately not receive its CO until they have the COA? Can you clarify?
You've got a failed inspection, correct? Because it doesn't align with the COA.
But it allows me, the inspector notes on there are to continue work, just to meet certain guidelines. But
Yeah, that's at your own risk. And that's one of those things where they won't receive, if they continue working now on the house and separating out the grade work, this board would have to approve the relocated windows. My staff is very aware of COAs at this point. We had school. And so at this point, the board would have to approve the building proper and then have the foundation and grade work go back to Lindsay. Otherwise,
Would that be the building overall, or could it just be window placement? Because whatever the solution is to the porch/deck thing, that is part of the building.
I think we need to identify what's not in compliance with the COA. It's the windows, it's the columns, it's the porch, and the driveway. I didn't realize the driveway was out of compliance. So I think you need to identify what you want changed from what they have to go back to Lindsay, and then if there's other items that are out of compliance, ultimately this board will either have to approve it, or if they don't, then you're kind of out of luck.
So basically, we could approve the change in windows and placement and the column nonconformity, and then require the foundation and site to come back. And that would allow them to continue work on the upper portion of the house, perhaps?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and as I sort of stated earlier, in terms of putting the onus on Lindsay too, is that if what comes back is still, if she's not comfortable with that, that then she can bring it back to the board as a whole if you want backup on that. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to try this again. With the intent that you can continue to work on the house itself, my motion is to approve the existing window location, approve the columns as they're shown in this picture, and require you to resubmit a design for the front porch and foundation and grading that is compatible with the guidelines that Lindsay can approve.
Second.
Suzanne, you said that leave the columns like they're shown in that photograph? That photograph?
I think
Yeah.
wrap them like that, yeah.
Yeah.
As they're intended.
Well, the picture she was showing, they were bare wood. So.
That's good clarification, as they're shown in the drawings and able to be completed.
You mean shown as completed on the other
The
houses?
white ones.
Yes, thank you.
It didn't exist.
Okay, so we have a motion, and we have a modification to the motion to clarify the columns, and we have Laura. Would you like to
Oh, my goodness.
Second. Second.
Yeah, just for Dallas and my clarification, we just want to make sure that this is not going to be a postponement. This is just 2 corrective approvals for the window placement and the columns, and then the resubmission is going to Lindsay at the applicant's pace.
Yes, and that, I should also clarify, it includes the driveway since that was non-conforming as well.
The approval of the existing driveway, or going to Lindsay?
Going to
Okay,
Lindsay.
got
That's
it.
included in the grading strategy.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Okay, Laura, so you're second on that? All right, so we have a motion.
I have a comment.
Okay, we have a comment?
What is happening? I don't know. I think I can support what we're talking about. I will say, I understand the nuances of all this here and all this sort of sounds like we're remedying some of the issues. This is pretty drastically different. So I forgot to say, I really appreciate your apology. I thought that was heartfelt and really honestly, you know, I appreciate that. I do think it's a significantly different. We spend a lot of time on porches, doors, columns. I'm looking at the ones that are approved. The doors are different, you know, siding layout, material. I do appreciate that. I think this is a reasonable thing to sort of bring in a line. Like if I'm highlighting one thing, I agree with Suzanne, it's the grade at the bottom. So I think that's a pretty reasonable, you know, we don't want to hold up applicants from moving their projects along. I think this board has proven to be very, you know, pro-applicant in the way of keeping the work going. So I think we're trying to respond to that, but also I think that is a concern if I'm picking one thing, you know, for me. So that's why I'm going to support what we're doing here. Less of a question, more of a comment. Sorry.
I have one last question. Was there anything about this that's going to trigger engineered stamp drawings for them to proceed with their work. For her to proceed with any work, she's going to have an engineered and approved by the city civil engineering drawing with retaining walls and structural possibly, correct?
Yeah, retaining walls are reviewed by city engineering.
But that's separate from the COA.
Yeah.
Correct, but her sword she's falling on, as she said, is to keep work going. So how,
We have a substantial amount on the inside that they can keep going with.
okay,
Is it change after permit?
that's what I mean.
We have submitted some change after permits on the driveway and so forth on the houses. I've done my best to make sure that I am up to code on everything. I just failed you guys.
Can I ask for a little bit of clarification for my folks? Looking at the approved COA, there's additional windows up in the gable end, and doors are very specific. Are we making any changes to those, or are we requiring them to go and install those windows as you see in the gable and install very specific doors?
Yeah, and so I can, just for Suzanne who made this motion, there is a description of work in the staff report that breaks down all of these different elements that you might want to refer to. But you can also frame your motion to, well, I'm not going to make a suggestion on the motion, but the elements that differ from what was built are broken down there in that description of work.
Okay, that triggers a question for me is, there was some discussion about the bay windows not working with the driveway alignment and the overall window placement not facilitating the interior use of space. So I can't imagine that the type of front door would be limited in those ways. So I guess my point is there anything that we should reasonably consider that would prevent you from installing the gable windows, installing the doors as shown here?
Unless we do facade windows, it's a engineered truss. We can't do any framing elements on it. It would just be a surface mount window. It would have to be painted black because that's the attic up there. You really wouldn't want to see in there unless you want to see the rafters driving up the street.
Was there something these were approved by you, right, before they were submitted by the architect? Or maybe you submitted them, I don't remember. But there should be some continuity between what you present and we expect to see and what is built. So is there a reason that the framing was different than we expected?
On all of my other houses I've done with infill, I've done them correctly. On this one, I just dropped the ball. I do have one other house on Connecticut, and I can assure you it will be to the T. To answer your question, everything about this has just been a disaster now that it's been brought to my attention. So as far as asking me about them specifically, when we started doing our first house, we realized with the rafters, and I was like, there's no way, nobody wants, or trusses, I'm sorry, there's no one that wants to see those. And so I was like, just frame it. When no one wants to see that, just have it solid.
Okay. I do think that it's relevant that the doors that are shown here are used on the houses. I mean, having a transom and full light door does elevate the look of the building.
I can definitely change out the door, but I have the same door on all of the 7 houses. So that would be different, and I can absolutely accommodate and do that.
I think that is the right move. I honestly don't know how to keep track of this motion, so I
think what you can do is amend your motion and do after the fact approval of the different elements in here. So. And then you can speak to the same thing.
I had an entire paper.
If I have to
Subject to them being able to continue work. Motion to approve the existing window placement, existing columns on the other houses that are completed. Recement porch foundation grading to Lindsay, recement driveway to Lindsay, and then whatever she has here, so. Is that
I guess that's the point that I don't understand what.
Oh, this part?
Yeah.
And I think that
What
we
to
should go out after.
change other than the door.
For the rest of the board, I think it's going to be very important that my staff understands what deviations we have.
Yeah, I think we should just.
Because unfortunately, they're probably going to be looking extremely closely. Not unfortunately, they will be. As a stopgap here. Yeah,
Okay.
In the original approved.
yes. As they're figuring stuff out, we brought in all of the inspectors. We had a zoning 101 class with them to where they are looking for the height. It's not an excuse. There's a lot of work in the city of Knoxville, and I don't have enough staff, but now they understand that they have to look at window heights. They have to look at every detail on these elevations. And when it's not, they throw the flag on the field and they say, go talk to planning. And so it's always going to be an issue because we go out, we look at footings. I'm not sure we look at foundations until we are out there for the framing inspection of the house. And so there's going to be a lot of work that's performed. Moving forward, I will tell them, don't let them keep working. They have to go back because you kept working and they probably identified these at the frame inspection, at the rough-in inspection. And at this point, it's probably got insulation, you've got drywall hung. They've kept going, which makes it harder for you, board members, to make them go back and change it versus if they had stopped, yeah, move the windows back where they need to be. You haven't drywalled, you haven't started, well, you haven't continued. I'm going to try and make it easier for you guys to do what you need to do versus allowing folks to continue.
I appreciate that, Peter, because like I said, I see every single infill house in Oakwood Lincoln Park, and there's always a little bit of tweak to it. I'm like, I don't remember seeing that. And again, it's small potatoes, given. But I also ask myself, like, at what point does an inspector look at it? What are they looking for? So I'm glad to hear that there has been that education moment.
Okay.
And if you need to deputize me to help you throw some flags, just let me know.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we've got it worked out. So I'm going to read this, and if Suzanne agrees, she's going to just say so moved at the end. So I believe the motion's intent is subject to the applicant's ability to continue to work on the project. There's a motion to approve part 1 for Dallas's sake. The existing window placement as built. 2, the existing columns as shown on the other completed houses. Part 3, that the applicant resubmit the porch, foundation, and grading to Lindsay for approval. Part 4, that the applicant resubmit the driveway to Lindsay for approval. Part 5, with the door, as previously approved in the March 2022 COA. So that one would not be changing. And then am I on 6? With the facade gable field window detail approved as built. Does that work? Okay,
So moved.
There we go. All right.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes.
We will have to make a second motion on 3415 Gap Road. That's 11E23IH.
I would like to make a motion that is identical to the previous motion.
Dallas, do you need me to read that again, or are you good? Okay, all right.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Nay. I mean, say nay. Anyway, thank you, everybody. With that, we are all done, and I will close the meeting. Thanks for coming, everybody, and thanks for all that hard work.